Aloha and mahalo. Well, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Of course, when people heard that I was one of the distinguished keynote speakers, my friends and colleagues had many suggestions for what I should speak to you all about. And Justin had his ideas, and other people at the USGS and colleagues in the oceanographic community had their ideas. What carried the day were actually Eddie Bernard's suggestions. And his thought was that here I had a chance to speak to a room full of the most talented ocean professionals, many of them with very strong technical skills. And if this was my one shot to inspire them, what would I want them to hear from me? And I decided that given my 12 years as head of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute and my past 2 years at the USGS, which was probably the defining moment for that, was my 4 months at BP headquarters working on the oil spill. What were my thoughts as to the grand challenges in marine technology and the problems that really needed to be solved? So my thought here is, what are the grand challenges in marine technology? There are so many problems, and here I have a room full of talent. So what do I hope that some of you will walk away from and hopefully put your minds to the solution to these problems? So here are my topics. This is surely not an exhaustive list, but it's my list. So marine pollution is the first one. The second is system reliability. The third is the confounding problem of biofouling. Fourth, submarine communications, which I also put in the bucket of artificial intelligence. And finally, expanding the toolbox of environmental sensors. Okay, starting with marine pollution, and this is the one that draws from my experience down in the Gulf working on the oil spill. And the USGS worked with NOAA and the Coast Guard in putting together what we call the oil budget. And what is really, I think, one of the best constrained parts of the oil budget is how much of the oil budget was contained by skimming. And that's this little black band here. So on this side is the total amount of oil released by the Macondo well, 4.9 million barrels of oil. And of that total, a mere 165,000 barrels was contained by skimming, 3%. 5% was burned. 17% was actually contained directly at the source by BP. The environment through microbial activity and evaporation managed to disperse about 49% or nearly half of the oil. So this is perhaps not surprising that the direct human intervention to try to skim the oil was so ineffective in the case of the Gulf oil spill. Skimming is a technology that was actually developed for a very, very different kind of oil spill. It was developed for the kind of oil spill in which a tanker, a ship ruptures or releases oil, and one can put booms around it to in some way contain the oil, and the oil is in thick patches, and skimmers can come in and scoop it up. In the case of the Gulf spill, this oil was coming up from a mile deep from the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. By the time it reached the surface, it was in very thin sheens and very little of it was thick oil that was actually even skimmable. Planes were patrolling the surface of the Gulf, even looking for skimmable patches of oil, and often what they thought was skimmable when the skimmers got out there wasn't. So we need other kinds of technology that will be able to deal with different kinds of oil spill. Another kind of oil spill that we're going to have to worry about is as we go into frontier areas, such as our Arctic coast, the fact that we are going into new areas will mean that we'll have different kinds of oil spills. And how prepared are we to clean up oil in ice-covered areas? This will be another kind of marine pollution that we need to be prepared to deal with. And this whole idea of this oil spill being a more dispersed kind of oil that our old technologies were not capable of dealing with because the oil was not as concentrated is just another example of the problem that we have with plastics in the ocean. Many of you have heard of the stories of how in the gyres in the Pacific, plastics collect, like in the North Pacific Gyre, and due to indiscriminate disposal of plastics in the ocean, and they have a very long lifetime in the ocean, there are these trash bins of plastic that are swirling around in the ocean. And many people, many average citizens say, well, why can't we go out and just collect the plastic and take it out of the ocean? Well, the problem is the plastic is not very concentrated. Although there's a lot of it out there, the truth is the plastic is diffuse, and that makes it very, very hard to collect. Now, of course, the solution to this is not to put the plastic in the ocean in the first place. But there's still a lot there, and therefore it would be advantageous to find some mechanisms to clean up diffuse pollution in the ocean, whether it be oil or plastics, because it is harming the environment. Okay, on to my next topic, and that is system reliability. Many of you who are oceanographers remember that the stalwart technologies of the 20th century for doing ocean research were, of course, research ships and moorings. And if I had to, in a nutshell, sort of characterize how we used energy with these kinds of technologies, basically their strategy was they used onboard sources of energy. In the case of the ship, fossil fuels on onboard energy plants. In the case of the moorings, very often packs and packs of D-cells. And later, they went to sometimes solar panels. But in the early generations, packs and packs of D-cells to power themselves. And they were very often fighting the energy of the ocean. So in the case of the power plants, they were fighting against the currents in the ocean, fighting against the waves in order to go where they wanted to. In the case of the moorings, using anchors to fight against the currents and the waves that were trying to move them off station. Now, as we went into the later part of the 20th century, engineers and scientists developed new strategies for putting research instruments into the ocean, and that was, instead of fighting the energy in the ocean, it was going with the flow. And this is just as of the 26th of August, the distribution of Argo floats in the ocean, which basically use the ocean's energy in order to disperse these floats and move them around passively with the ocean's own circulation system. And of course, we also have, and here's just an example of how it has its own onboard lithium batteries as a buoyancy engine, so it can sample in the vertical. And then, of course, there's also glider systems which have batteries which help propel them, but they also take advantage of the ocean's energy system so that they can glide on the updrafts and downdrafts in the ocean. So the important point of these two technologies is rather than fighting the ocean's energy, they take advantage of it. And an even more recent addition is liquid robotics wave glider, which uses solar energy in order to power it. It's also a glider type system which has a significant below the ocean presence, and it can use the solar energy to also power some hotel loads. And this is a slide from MBARI that just shows that a system like this can take advantage of significant solar radiation in the tropical latitudes in order to provide energy. And wind power is complementary to that, so wind power systems would be very advantageous at higher latitudes. So we're getting to the point where research systems are taking a lot of advantage of the fact that the ocean is an energy-rich environment and that we don't have to fight it anymore. We can actually harvest it in order to have the ocean help us in our research mission. But as we're getting longer and longer research missions, system reliability is becoming a very important parameter, because as these systems go out on longer and longer missions, for example, missions that will go out for weeks at a time, the importance of having systems in which the mechanical functioning as well as the onboard processors can function often in the case of systems that are without human intervention, can go for entire mission durations without fault, is becoming incredibly important. And that is sometimes the critical factor in the success or the failure of a mission. And some of these systems, not only if you look not just at their development costs, but the cost of the hardware itself, and then the cost of the data that they have collected, you don't want these missions to fail because they have to make it to the other end because of the worth of the hardware and the data collected. So system reliability is very important. Okay, next topic. This is another picture from MBARI. This was an ADCP, an acoustic system that spent just a few months in the highly productive coastal waters off Monterey Bay. You can imagine how well it was functioning by the time it was recovered. And biofouling is one of the longest standing problems we have in the ocean, particularly in productive coastal waters. It is one of the problems that we spend the most money on, because when you think of the amount of funding it takes to send out a ship, recover systems, scrape off all the in this case, the barnacles and other biology that's clinging to it, and redeploy it when otherwise everything was working just fine. This is a very, very expensive problem. Now, there are some solutions which have proved successful. For example, this is a simple copper shutter which has been put on an optical instrument, and turns out that biology hates copper, so that system has worked well. But, you know, this is still a major problem, and every boat owner knows of the problems of biofouling. For example, in Monterey Bay, I can't tell you the lengths that sailboat owners go to keep sea lions off the decks of their boats because of the problem that sea lions consider every unattended boat a hotel that they will move into and trash. So biofouling is not just a problem in the oceanographic community, it's a problem for everyone. Geofouling is also a problem. This was a seismometer that was put near the crest of the mid-ocean ridge in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, here it was. It came back, the oceanographers came back. This was put in September of 1991. They came back in May, and it was encased in a massive sulfide deposit. So even geofouling can be a problem as well. Let me go to communications and artificial intelligence, because these are two sides of the same coin. Very often in oceanography, we have the problem of communicating with sensors underwater. This is all the problem of the fact that we can't send electromagnetic signals underwater. And very often the simpler problem is just to make really smart platforms that can make their own decisions without us having to babysit them and tell them what to do. And so onboard intelligence, artificial intelligence, is what we really want them to do. And I equate that to having something like a really smart yellow lab. Like Bo here. Well, maybe Bo's not the smartest example of his breed, but he just was willing to pose for the picture. So I'm using Bo as my example. And so let's suppose we could build an autonomous underwater vehicle that, like Bo, you could send him out on a mission, tell him what to look for, like, for example, a Pepsi can, and Bo would go out on his mission. He would search around, he would find the Pepsi can, he would gently pick it up and bring it back to you. That could save you an awful lot of money in hunting and pecking for your Pepsi can. So there have actually been some successful attempts at this, and I'm going to give an example from Mbari's work. This is the Mbari gulper water sampler, and this is the payload section of the AUV that has this Gatling gun type gulper samplers. And there are a number of them that can be mounted in the payload part of the AUV. And KONA Rajan is the brains behind the artificial intelligence on this, where the AUV goes out and onboard sensors will basically go through the ocean, and they will look for a signal of interest. And when the onboard sensors find whatever signal it is of interest, whether it's biological, chemical, or physical, whatever it might be, then the AUV knows enough to turn around, go back, and with these water samplers, take water samplers when it re-enters that water body that has the signal of interest. Once it has shot all its water samplers, it then knows it has completed its mission and comes back to you with its water samplers. Now, this AUV was recently deployed in the Gulf of Mexico during the oil spill, when its mission was to look for deep oil. Remember that during the Gulf oil spill, there was a lot of concern that not all of the oil was coming up to the surface, that there might be plumes of deep oil that were remaining submerged and causing a oil pollution that was riding the deep currents in the Gulf. So here is that AUV gulper being deployed from the NOAA research ship Gordon Gunther. And the AUV went down, and it used a CDON fluorescence detector as its proxy for oil in the water. And it detected this anomaly in the water that was about 5 miles down current from the wellhead. And when it detected that anomaly in the water, it then went back and sampled with the gulpers inside this anomalous body, brought those samples back to shore then for analysis and fingerprinting to show that it was indeed Macondo oil. And then finally, my last topic is environmental sensors. Clearly, all the work that we do in developing sophisticated platforms and artificial intelligence is only as good as the sensors that we put in the water. We've come a long way with chemical sensors, and it's certainly there's been spillover in terms of how it's enriched our ability to even explore the terrestrial environment. I'm really fond of saying that because we can't explore the deep sea except with remote tools, often we have first developed those tools in the ocean, and then we've used them in the terrestrial environment, and it has made our sampling of the terrestrial environment cheaper and less labor intensive. And so we've actually benefited in the terrestrial environment because of our investment in ocean technology. There was a recent paper in PLOS Biology by Mora et al. That estimates that there are 8.7 million eukaryotic species on the planet, of which 91% in the ocean have not yet been described. And at the rate we are going, it would take more than 1,000 years and more than $300 billion to describe all of those species. However, most are likely to be small with small geographical ranges and found in geographical hotspots. And they would lend themselves to automated methods of detection and genotyping. This is a grand challenge. This is worthy of the minds in this room. We need to develop technologies such as, this is the MBARI ESP, Environmental Sample Processor. It takes in RNA in the ocean and identifies the microbial ocean based on its RNA. Tools like this could be used to help take those 8.7 eukaryotic species, 91% in the ocean, and help understand the undescribed species on this planet. This is the Hui Sentry, which is, in this case, it is, this has an actual tool on the front which does, was deployed in the oil spill to do chemical analysis underwater, in which case it could actually take in water and do a full chemical analysis of the water, a full mass spec underwater in the ocean, and truly was revolutionary in its ability to help with the understanding of the chemical processes that were going on downstream from the Macondo wellhead. So sensors like this are extremely important in terms of our ability to understand processes in the ocean. So in closing, after 4 months in Houston last year, as I was packing up my office in Houston to go back to the USGS, a young Navy lieutenant, Joe Kuzek, who had been with me for the duration of the oil spill, asked me how working on the oil spill had changed me. And without a moment's hesitation, I said to him, after my time here, I will never again work on a problem that's not significant. And my challenge to you is to all dedicate the rest of your careers to working on problems of significance. Thank you all very much.